Lanny Mark Poffo was born on December 28th, 1954, and passed away unexpectedly on February 2nd, 2023. I wanted to make this video because Lanny was the very first pro wrestler I ever met. I was most likely about 6 years old, and my uncle took me to a WWF house show. So Lanny was on the card, and at the time, he was called Leaping Lanny Poffo. In the mid-1980s, Lanny would throw out an orange frisbee with a poem printed on the front that he personally wrote. At this time, they were not yet selling the frisbees, so he'd toss out like 5 or 6 of them to the fans, and if you caught one, you would be able to meet Lanny during the intermission, have a photo with him, as well as have the frisbee signed. I caught one of them, so I got to meet him. I will never forget that moment. Myself, a 6-year-old boy, getting to meet a larger-than-life pro wrestler that I watch on TV regularly. I still have the photograph, I still have the frisbee, and I still have the memories. I do cite Wikipedia for some of the information that I found. So we'll begin this by saying Lanny was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. His father was Angelo and his mother was Judy. Lanny was the real-life younger brother of wrestler Randy Macho Man Savage. At an early age, the Poffo family moved to Illinois, where he and Randy grew up in a city called Downers Grove. Lanny was trained to become a pro wrestler by his dad, Angelo the Miser Poffo. Lanny debuted in 1974 and had his very last match in 2020. Lanny would use the ring names Leaping Lanny Poffo as well as the Genius. Lanny got his start in All South Wrestling Alliance in 1974, and in the summer of that year, he tag teamed with his dad, Angelo, beating a team called the Royal Kangaroos. Lanny and Angelo would head to the NWA from 1974 through 1978, and more specifically, Big Time Wrestling out of Detroit, who was an affiliate of the National Wrestling Alliance. Lanny and his father would also win the NWA Tag Team Championship. Lanny would eventually break off as a singles wrestler, traveling the territories, where he'd receive an NWA Championship match versus Terry Funk in St. Louis. He lost, but it was a televised match. Around 1976, Lanny and his brother Randy Poffo went to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and would form a tag team for the very first time. Lanny would eventually keep traveling the territories, where he would wrestle Harley Race in an NWA Championship match to a draw. He would also work out in Portland with the likes of Roddy Piper, and in 1979 end up in the promotion his dad founded called ICW, International Championship Wrestling, where he would both fight alongside and against his brother Randy Savage. Lanny would eventually win the ICW Championship and stay there until the promotion closed in 1984. Lanny would have 2 more stops before making it to the WWF, the first being in Mid-South Wrestling in 1984. I guess Lanny and Rick Rude teamed up and worked against the Midnight Express on some house shows. As far as I could tell, Lanny had 1 more stop in the CWA, Continental Wrestling Association, from 1984 to 85 before showing up in the WWF. There he'd team with his brother Randy, and they would have a nice feud with the Rock and Roll Express. Lanny made his WWF debut on July 13th, 1985. This was on an episode of WWF Championship Wrestling. Lanny would mostly be considered a babyface or a good guy throughout his early WWF career, tossing frisbees to his fans with poems he personally wrote printed on the front of them. During his early WWF career, they used him mostly as what they would call a jobber or an enhancement talent. This would be to make the bigger stars look better, and Lanny was really good at that. Lanny was in the land of the giants back then, and he certainly was smaller for that time, which led to some pretty awesome acrobatics by him, to be honest. He was the first guy after the wrestler Tiger Mask to perform a moonsault off of the top rope, as far as I know. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's how it is. Nearing the end of the 1980s, new things were on the horizon for Lanny Poffo, as big changes were in the works. On a March 18th, 1989 WWF event in Boston, I believe it was, they turned Lanny Poffo heel, aka a bad guy, and thus the genius was born. So ordinarily, Lanny would come out and he would read a poem, friendly to the fans, or talking about the wrestler that he's going against who was a bad guy or something like that. And this time Lanny came out and he had written a poem about I believe the Red Sox or whatever, some local Boston team or something like that, talking really bad about him, and it was very humorous. So that was the beginning of Lanny being a bad guy. The genius Lanny Poffo would now come out wearing a cap and gown and carrying a scroll with his poetry on it, which he would use to belittle the city that he was in, or the fans booing him, or the opponent he was about to face. It was always very entertaining, in my opinion. So again, I'm not going to get into every single feud that he had as the genius, but he was successful as the genius, and I urge you guys to research this if you are a pro wrestling fan and didn't grow up in this time of wrestling or whatnot. Quickly, some of Lanny's notable feuds as the genius was with Brutus the Barber Beefcake, where he got his hair cut, as well as a match he had with Hulk Hogan, where he beat Hulk Hogan via count out, but he still beat him, so that was a pretty big deal. The genius would also have a run both tag teaming and managing Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. So the end of Lanny's run as the genius in the WWF would see him managing the tag team of the Beverly Brothers, Bo and Blake Beverly. And I thought that tag team was highly underrated, to be honest, and they should have had a tag team championship run. Outside of the WWF, Lanny would continue to wrestle for various companies throughout the 1990s, as well as wrestle, and I put air quotations around that, lovingly and jokingly, for WCW wrestling. And any wrestling fans will know the story about that, and if you don't, look it up. It's kind of funny. So Lanny actually had his final match in 2020. So that's pretty amazing to me. This man had an incredible career. On February 2nd, 2023, one of Lanny's best and lifelong friends, former wrestler Hacksaw Jim Duggan, broke the news to the wrestling world. Lanny had passed away unexpectedly at age 68 of heart failure. Lanny was a very talented man, both inside and out of the ring. He lived his gimmick. He truly was a genius. I will always have a place in my heart and memories for Lanny, being the first wrestler I ever met, and knowing what I now know as an adult. It was truly an honor to have met him as a 6-year-old little kid and a lifelong wrestling fan who is still a wrestling fan. So thank you, Lanny. Thanks for all the memories. So this is the frisbee that I caught at a WWF house show when I was only 6 years old. Lanny tossed about 5 of these out to the crowd, and I caught one of them. Got to meet him during the intermission, and he gave me the option of having him sign it nice catch exclamation point or to Mike exclamation point leaping Lanny, and you'll see it when I flip it over, but I had him personalize it to me, so let's take a look at the front of this here. This is a poem that he personally wrote himself. I'm going to read this, but I could never do it justice the way Lanny could, I'm sure. The World Wrestling Federation has caused a culture shock in every phase of our society from classical to rock. In triumphant jubilation, every social class is one, with a single common interest just to have a little fun. I've seen the rapture in the eyes of fans of every nation. You made us what we are today, World Wrestling Federation. Best wishes, Leaping Lanny. So that was the front side of that. The back side, if I can get it to stay up there. To Mike, Leaping Lanny. So I just want to say I remember catching this frisbee as if it were yesterday. And being a 6-year-old kid, getting to meet a wrestler that you watch on TV who's larger than life. I just, like I said, I remember it like it was yesterday. I got to go out there during the intermission and meet Lanny. He was set up for the photo op pretty close to where the merch stand was at the time. And I just remember it so vivid, clear as crystal. I just remember that green Jake the Snake Roberts shirt hanging on the wall where they would like display all the shirts. And I still have the photograph. I'm trying to find it. It's amongst all my wrestling photos. Like I said, Lanny Poffo was the very first wrestler I ever had the chance to meet. I have been a lifelong fan of wrestling for the sport of professional wrestling, not for the dumbass, stupid shit that they do. I am still a fan to this day, and looking, looking back on it, man, it was a true honor to meet him. I was only 6 years old, but it's a memory that stuck with me my entire life, and it will until the day I'm dead. So, thanks, Lanny. Any wrestling fans that watched this tribute to a great man outside of wrestling, family man, a wonderful wrestler inside of the ring, and just an overall interesting and cool guy, man. Give the video a like for me. I appreciate that. And thanks for watching.